And so as a parent, I think the hardest thing is like to ask yourself, man, like what's the best thing for my kid right now? And do they believe it's the best thing or not? Because if they're not bought in, they're not going to give their full energy anyway. And so, yeah, I think that just the space for parents to ask the right questions, the open ended questions for their kids to openly talk is just so important.
Welcome to the Generation Youth Podcast. I'm James McLamb. I'm your host, back again this week with another exciting episode. I have a new friend that I just met recently through a mutual acquaintance, Tammy Matheny, Andrew Simpson. How are you doing today, Andrew?
Man, I'm doing great today. I'm excited to be on, excited for your energy.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. You know where the energy comes from, so that's fun. Andrew, our audience would love to connect with you and learn more about you. They don't want to hear it just from me. They would like to hear it from you. So if you wouldn't mind, take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself to the Generation Youth audience.
Well, my name is Andrew J. Simpson. I've got a family of almost 5. My wife is due with the baby on May 14th. So,
Oh, wow.
Depending on when you're listening to this, we may have our 3rd child. So, a family of 5. Faith is very important to me. Family is very important to me, and coaching young athletes and helping them get better in every area of life is important to me. So, my story started back when I was 19 years old, and I ended up getting into this field of fitness and sports performance coaching, personal training, helping young athletes get bigger, faster, stronger. And within just a few weeks of me entering that field, I was working in a big indoor sports complex, and I felt led to go over and watch one of the soccer games, the youth soccer games. And within moments of me sitting in the bleachers for this game, I heard that horrifying sound that you're probably familiar with, James. We're all familiar with. It's a coach screaming at one of his players. And I just heard this kid. I saw this kid make a mistake on the field, and the coach just erupted. Jimmy, what are you doing? I can't believe you. That was a stupid play. Get off the field. And just berated this kid on the field. And this 9-year-old walks off the field, just defeated. And in that moment, I knew, like, okay, I like personal training. I like helping athletes get bigger, faster, stronger. But I knew that I had a heart to help whatever it is that just happened, because that kid was about to go fear failure for the rest of his life. And I wanted to make a difference there. And so that kind of led me down a path of getting into helping athletes, not just with the physical, but also with the mental piece, with the emotional piece. And so that takes us to where we are today.
Well, that's relates back to what you said very early when you said coaching young athletes on every level, because that's what I was going to land on with the first. What do you mean every level? So you kind of gave us a preview of that, but dive a little bit more about that, because I've experienced what you experienced. I did not want to be my son's baseball coach because of my background of being a baseball player and doing things like that. I did not want to bring all those kind of thoughts and feelings to them. And I watched as a very highly rated league with a very highly rated coaching team of 6 or 7-year-olds yell at their kids in the outfield, 7-year-olds, and said, "You boys are pathetic." And it was that time that I said, "No, I'm going to have to do it." I'll have to do it. So I understand what you're talking about there, but let's dive into that on coaching athletes on every level. What do you mean by that, and where has that led you to?
Yeah. Well, once I realized that the 2 most important words that a kid says, a 21st century adolescent kid says, are the words coach says. All right. Coach says, but mom, coach said this, but dad, coach said this. As soon as I learned that that was very true, I realized that, man, this is an opportunity for me to make a big difference in these kids' lives. And now we have a bunch of coaches on our team that can do the same thing and expand the impact. And so once I realized the extreme responsibility there, I was like, wow, let's try to do this thing the right way. And so building a relationship with an athlete as a person first, connecting with them opens the door to be able to coach them on every level. In the beginning, they might just be coming to us because they want bigger biceps and to improve their 40-yard dash. And so if that's what they want, that's what will help them get. But then along the way, it's all about how do we connect? How do we build a deeper bond? How do we build trust so that we can help them in the areas that are actually going to have a bigger impact in their life, helping them learn how to control their mindset, helping them learn that it's better to give than just to get, how to be a servant leader. All these principles that every parent wants their kid to embrace. As coaches, for us, we take it as our responsibility to at least, if not directly coach them, connect them to the right resources to be able to do it. And that can only happen when there's trust, when they trust you first.
I love that, and it relates really well to what our mission here at Generation Youth is. So I felt a lot of synergy going through that.
Yeah.
This motivated you to dive into writing as well. So take us through. You started with one book. What was your original book that you started with?
Actually, this was not planned. It's right up on the shelf, video version of this this podcast, but it's called The Youth Truth: Coaching and Parenting in Today's Crazy Youth Sports World. And I did not plan on writing this book, but 2018, my dad had a horrible battle with lung cancer, ended up passing away 6 months after he was diagnosed. And I was reading a book by a guy named Mark Batterson called Chase the Lion. And in that book, he shares that the reason that he writes books is because they're like time capsules. He writes them so that his children's children can know what their great great grandfather stood for. And he just shared these words that were resonating with me, like, every person has a mission while they're on this earth, and if you don't share it, if you don't capture it in something that can go on for eternity, or for not eternity but for a long time, right, if you don't capture it in something like a book, then it'll be lost when you leave the earth. And so after my dad passed away, I felt, and I just could, like, it was almost palpable, just the fragility of life and how life can be taken from you in a moment. And so I'm like, I have this message that's on my heart, and it's burning on my heart to help parents and coaches have a better way to support their athletes without interfering and driving them away from sports. And so that book is just packed with, it's 4 parts. Part one is shining a spotlight on the current state of youth sports. So just the reality of where we're at.
All right,
Part
stop right there. Let's just
Yeah, go ahead.
tell me about that. Tell me about where you think we're at right now, because I'm thinking somebody's listening and they're like, "What does he mean? I've got my little Johnny and Susie about to get into sports. What does he mean? The current state of youth sports. So what's going on?"
Well, per the subtitle, it is the crazy world of youth sports. Everything from parents fist fighting at sports games to anxiety and depression at an all time high. For a lot of athletes, as a result of sports, where sports used to be this, like, they can teach life lessons, and they still can, now sports are creating so much pressure and fear and anxiety in kids, because they are going to be a $70 billion industry by 2030, right? It's about $37 billion right now. By 2030, it'll be 76 billion, the last statistic I saw. And anytime money is involved, I'm included in this, right? I'm just as susceptible to making poor decisions for the athletes based on what I can get out of it, right? Because we're a for-profit business. We train athletes. And so I can be tempted to go down a bad path with that too. But anytime money is involved, we make bad decisions sometimes that aren't always in love, that more so is just what we can get out of it. So it's a money-making business of youth sports. Kids are just struggling through sports. Parent or coaches, like I said in the beginning, berating their players on the field, making it more about winning than developing the individual. And I always have to, like, pause when I say that too, because again, our business, like, it is predicated on helping athletes get bigger, faster, stronger, so they can get to the next level. So what we've found, though, we've created this thing called the winning athlete formula, and it's combining how do we help our athletes be really successful and maintain their health and well-being mentally, physically, emotionally along the way. And so where the state of youth sports is right now, though, I mean, injuries are at an all-time high and climbing. It's just not good. And it's gotten better because there's a lot of great people that I've met over the last 5 years since writing that book, like yourself, like Tammy, like so many people that are doing the right thing for kids so that they can develop into healthy, happy human beings. So there's a lot more good than there was 5 years ago, but the truth remains, right? Youth sports are still a pretty intense atmosphere when you look at the capacity of an 8, 9, 10-year-old to handle, right, that kind of pressure. So
Yeah, I see that. My wife coaches as well. She coaches cheerleading at the middle school that my daughter attends, and one of the things that she has witnessed is the reluctance on parents to allow their daughters to try out for cheerleading at the school because it interferes with their travel cheer
mm,
and their competitive cheer, not really travel cheer, competitive cheer.
yeah,
And I'm like, really? I mean, for one thing, to my understanding, money available for cheerleading for college is like not there. I mean, it's like
yeah,
there. So, what are they trying to do? What is their goal for their daughter being involved in this
right.
versus connecting and having those bonds and relationships with their classmates? That confused me. We resisted my son entering travel ball very, very early on in baseball, and might have set him behind on some of the things, but it was a choice that we made for our own
Yeah.
sanity as a family versus others as well. So, um,
Yeah. Yeah, we got to be careful too because like we obviously want to celebrate, recognize, reward our kids for doing good in sports, but that's also a problem because what we celebrate and reward gets repeated and gets valued and we place the biggest emphasis on. And so the reward, right, in athletics at the highest level is you get paid more money than any other human being on the planet, right? You have more status, more popularity than anyone else. And so with that, kids see that and it's part of why they strive, right? Because they're like, well, mom and dad are going to post about this on social media. This is what mom and dad, I hear them talking about it to their friends. It's what they're always concerned about. They're always asking me questions about how did I do in my game? Like, of course, I'm going to strive and work to, do everything I can to be successful. And again, not inherently bad, right? You can be a high achiever, high performer, but if you don't have the hierarchy of values correct, which is what I talk a lot about in the Youth Truth book, is how to help a teenage kid, a teenage athlete, establish what their values are. And as a family, you should probably do that first, right? As parents, we need to figure out what we value most, and then make sure that's reflected through. Hey, if I value, church and spiritual growth more than anything else, then I might have to teach my kid a lesson by making a tough decision on Sundays when I could be going to a game. But again, if I truly do value this thing in my life the most, and my actions are misaligning, that's when anxiety, stress, and tension is created on the inside, and that's what's happening with a lot of young athletes nowadays.
Andrew, that's a complicated issue to handle that parents have to navigate. Is they have FOMO as well, the fear of missing out. The parents don't want their child to miss out on these opportunities, and so they are sacrifices, as you said, what they feel like they hold true, their values and their commitments to their family or their faith or anything on that. So, what advice would you give them? I mean, how old is your oldest?
My oldest is 5.
5. So you're about to get into it maybe in a few
I'll
years
get into
of
it.
having to make
Exactly.
those choices about what
Yeah.
to do if they're going to participate in those things. What do we say to parents that are saying, I don't want Johnny and Susie to be ostracized or left out or feel less valued in that realm, but at the same time, I want them to grow up with the right perspective on life and the right values.
hmm
What do we say
So
to them?
this is one of the hardest things to do, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
to stay. It's integrity. It's staying committed to what we said was important. It's all these things, and I don't know a better way to do it than as a parent myself. If I have those fears for them, I probably don't have enough of it on the inside of myself, right? That conviction, that steadfastness. Like I really do believe it's like I need to get myself to a more consistent, higher place of integrity. And then if I do that work, then when I'm talking with my kid, I can bring it from a place of example, right? Versus just like, hey, I don't need to make sacrifices as a parent, but my children, you guys got to make sure you live in alignment with the values. So it's a long play. It's more of an idealistic approach, right? I definitely recognize that it's more idealistic, but it's possible to do better than we're currently doing. And I think that's the goal, right? Is if like if you, I've had a lot of parents who have read the book that they felt like they were way off the mark from what I wrote. They were like, man, we got so much work to do. I'm like, just what's progress look like? What does crawl, walk,
Yeah.
run look like? Like that's all we got to do. And so the whole living in alignment with your values is a big piece of that book for sure.
So what was the next book that you did? So we've gotten some parents now are going, oh my gosh, I got to get the first one because I think we're messing up here in the house. Uh,
Well, I'll tell you,
Andrew's telling us I shouldn't be on the soccer field every Sunday morning. I need to be having family time or faith time here.
yeah. Well, there's a healthy balance of from a coach's perspective and a parent's perspective in that first book. So if you're the parent, you get some breaks throughout it because then you get to be like, oh yeah, coaches need to be better at this. Coaches need to stop doing this. It's all on you, right? And so no, I think it's a great way for the triangle to be in effect, right? The athlete, the coach, the parent, all of us to work together, the common good of the athlete. And so that was the first book. The second book is really directed towards athlete mental health and how to help an athlete. There are these 7 mindset hacks in the book. The book is literally called Athlete, I'm Talking to You. And it's the 7 mindset hacks to dominate in sports and life. Back in 2022, I don't know if you recall this, but there was this span of time where so many college athletes were taking their own lives. The suicide rate was going through the roof. And it was like every time you turn on TV, it was another college athlete at a big university who had taken their own life. And I was hearing so much finger pointing and seeing so much finger pointing. And my first book may be part of the problem, right? Like so much finger pointing, like coaches, you need to change. Parents, you need to change. Society needs to change. And the society is the reason why these athletes were going down the dark path. And I was like, well, what if society doesn't change? What if coaches don't change? What if parents don't change? We like if I'm a 18-year-old, 17-year-old athlete, like I want to be equipped with tools to be able to get my mind right in those moments and recognize that I am not my sport, what my coach says about me or my coach's decisions. I don't have to internalize that and make that my identity, even if my parents put a lot of pressure on me as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 20-year-old athlete. Like, how do I still make sure I don't raise my own pressure in my life? How do I keep myself level? Like all these ways to just really take back control of your own mindset, which is part of what the subtitle is. I wanted to make sure athletes had that resource. And so that was that book. That's why I wrote that second book.
Funny you say that about them doing it, getting those tools, because a lot of folks will say, well, why now instead of 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Why are we having these problems now? And one of the premises that I have is youth are just reacting to the world that we have given them. We created this world and we did not prepare them, mainly because we didn't really know what the implications were and the things that were going to happen as we created this environment. We thought to use sports, these AAU, these tribal teams, these competitive teams, this was going to be for their benefit. And in some ways it maybe hasn't helped in some, but in others it hasn't.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you the story that goes along with that second book. There were these 4 Division I college lacrosse players that trained with us at PFP at our gym for quite a few years. And we were doing everything we could to prepare them for college sports, but we didn't do everything, right? Because when they went away as freshmen, they got crushed by some coaches who maybe had their own stuff going on in their own lives, but man, they delivered some words and some unkind actions to these girls. And so basically, these girls come back to our gym in May after they finished up their freshman year, and they walked in the doors, and I could just tell like there was something going on. They were not encouraged after their first year of lacrosse. And I was like, all right, girls, we're not working out today. Let's go back in, the back office and let's just chat, right? Let's get some of this stuff off your chest. And so these 4 girls are in the room, and within moments, one of them starts sharing about, Coach Andrew, like my coach, our coach, she would look at us and tell us that we were worthless and that what were we even doing at this level? We're not equipped to play at this level. We're never going to make it. We're terrible. Like this coach really had a lot going on in his or her own life. So one girl starts crying, and then the next girl starts crying, and then all of a sudden I'm in this room and all 4 of these girls are just sobbing, right? And it was good, right? Get it out. If you don't let it out, you'll act it out, right? And so they're sobbing, they're crying, and they're sharing, basically their sob story. Although I did empathize with it, they're sharing, and then at the end, I was like, okay, well, all I'm wondering is why aren't any of you grateful for this experience? And they were like, are you kidding me? Like they wanted to kill me in that moment, right? They were like, why on earth would we be grateful for this experience? And I said, I'm being dead serious. I said, why wouldn't you find a way to be grateful for this? If it weren't for this experience that you were having, let's be honest, you would not be the person you are right now. You would not have the empathy for the other players on the team that you currently have. Some of you guys want to be coaches in the future. Could you imagine if you didn't go through this? You would not be near as good of a coach as you will be someday because of this experience. And it was the gift of adversity, which is mindset hack number 1 from that book. Adversity is always a gift if you truly look at it through the right lens. And that's when it really dawned on me, like, these athletes need to take back control of their mindset. It is not your conditions, it's your decisions that will shape your destiny. It's what you do with those things that happen to you, your injuries, and man, in the book, the thing I'm most excited about in the second book was 6 college athletes came forward and shared their stories of, going through a deep valley, but then how they came out of it. And so I like to tell people, get the second book, not because of what I put in it, because what I put in it is just what I put in it. Get it because of what those 6 stories are, right? Because those 6 stories are what athletes nowadays, high school, college athletes, can actually relate to and resonate with. So yeah, that's the second book, man.
Wow. So first book, we're talking to you talked about the triangle. The first book talks to 2 points of the triangle, the parents and the coaches. The third one, obviously, is talking to the athlete themselves. Where do we go with the third book, the one that you have just recently released?
Yeah.
where are we going to in that one? We've hit all the 3 points. Is this thing a square now? What do we got here going? So
I mean, you and I both. I didn't think I was going to write another book in this genre, right? I was like, I'm good, right? I covered the basis, but the new book actually is right here, The Unstoppable Athlete, the 12 Keys to Unlock Your Full Potential. This book, it's written to the athlete, but there's actually a parent edition too. I guess I had to like balance it out with this third one. So there's 2 separate books so that parents could know, what questions to ask their kid, how to connect with them as they're going through the book. And it's less than 100 pages so that it's easily digestible. But I wrote this one because there's 2 reasons, 2 types of athletes I wrote this one to. The first athlete is the one who maybe they didn't make the team they wanted to make. Maybe they didn't get the starting position. Maybe they didn't get to the level at college they wanted to get to. And as a result, they started to lower their standards and just say, you know what? I am where I am and it's good enough. And I'm like, no, like it's good to be content, but not complacent, right? There's still something inside of you that should be striving for a higher level of achievement, right? Like, how do you truly become unstoppable as an athlete? Mindset, habits, right? In this book, I talk more about habits than in any other of the 2 books. This is about what are some peak performance habits? How do you manage your time? How do you manage your energy? What does your rest, recovery, your sleep look like? How does your training look like? And then there is some mindset in it too. But it was like this first person that the book was for was to inspire and encourage and equip the athlete who wanted to be the best they could be, but honestly, they never were going to unless they start developing the right habits, give them those tools. Because a lot of, I wanted a book actually that parents could be like, you know, Andrew, I wanted to say all these things to my athlete and I do, but they never hear me and they never listen to me. It goes in one ear and out the other. And so I'm glad you wrote this book, Andrew, because you're saying all the things that I've been trying to tell them, but now because it's a coach telling them, they're going to listen. And that's the first person. The second person that I wrote this book for was the athlete that was an achiever, kind of like myself, always striving to achieve more, be more, kind of never satisfied at the end of the day. Like good is never good enough. And that athlete will eventually be stopped by anxiety, burnout, fear of missing out, injury. Like that's the kind of athlete that you can see their path already, right? They're just never going to have that joy in their sport that they could. And they're probably going to be stopped before they reach their full potential. So 2 different types of unstoppable that the book covers. And I think most athletes can resonate with at least one of those 2.
I love that you're talking about habits in this one. Tom
Mm-hmm.
Ziegler, the son of the great and legendary Zig Ziglar, wrote a book called Choose to Win. And the premise of
Mm.
that book is the fastest way to success is to replace a bad habit with a good habit. And then he
That's
goes
perfect.
through different dimensions of your life: spiritual, financial, personal, family. I think there's 7 dimensions he goes through and examines, looking at each of those areas, identifying what is a bad habit that you have in that area, and
Mm.
let's concentrate on changing that one, and let's just work on that one spot. And then over a year's time, if you've worked on all 7, and maybe if you're really ambitious and successful working on all 7 twice,
Mm.
then you're going to be in a whole different place.
Yeah.
But that's the premise, is changing a. And he tells a story that he was doing a conference overseas somewhere, and someone asked him the question, "What's the fastest way to success?" He'd never been asked that question before. He didn't ask, "What's the keys to success? What's the steps?" All that kind of stuff. The fastest way, and he just blurted out without even thinking, "I'll just replace a bad habit with a good habit." And they went to break, and they came back, and the host was like, "Did y'all get that profound statement that Tom said before the break?" And he was like, "What profound statement did I say before the break? Let me write this down if he repeats it." And so
Yeah, that's good.
on his
I like
flight
that.
back, he fleshed out the book on that. So I love that you're dealing with that, because I do think immediately I started thinking about my own young athletes, my 2 oldest and my youngest as well, what they do that they could have used to change, and the ones that I've coached and the ones that I've seen.
Yeah.
There's so much there.
Yeah. Well, it's so tempting too, just to look at some of these great athletes. And in the book, I talk about the LeBron Jameses, the Lionel Messis, Simone Biles, right? Even though she had a challenge with her mental health, but now she's back. Like I talk about a lot of these great athletes. And I think as a teenage or college athlete, the only thing you really know about them are they grinded, they worked their tails off, they had a lot of natural athleticism, and they got to where they were. But there's so many more habits that they have than just that, right? Just hard work alone will probably get you injured at some point or probably get you, burnt out, right? If you just are a grinder and you work, work, work. And so like habits of, like I said, rest, recovery, reflection. How do you reflect on your past victories and your progress so that you do keep your passion alive on the inside and you keep your fuel alive on the inside? Most athletes don't have any kind of rhythm of reflection. So I've got journaling prompts in the book and whatnot, but there's a lot of, and I connect them to some sort of a professional athlete that is not just great for a couple seasons, but what about enduring greatness? The athletes like LeBron James who have lasted 21 years, and you wouldn't know it, but his hobbies, his family life, his service outside of sports, like he has a lot of areas that he has good balance in his life. Now, I will say, when I'm asked the question, who's the greatest basketball player of all time, I always say Jordan. But when I look at who has a better life overall and a more balanced life, it's hard to argue that Jordan does. Because when Jordan's interviewed, he doesn't seem like he's too joyful in his life and he's really happy with where he's at, and doesn't seem like he's got a great, like support system even at this point. So I think that there's a lot to learn about athletes that are healthy, happy, and high performing at the same time.
That's powerful. That's powerful. What are some of the tips from that book? I'm thinking right now we got a parent that's sitting there and is listening. And is like, all right, how do I start helping them with their habits? What is my first step to help my kid be unstoppable? Don't we don't want to give away the book. We want them to come and buy it, but let's give them a teaser there to kind of go, because I want to know too. I mean, I got a kid now who's moving from cheerleading to softball, and she's finding a passion with that she wants to do in high school. And they're like, okay, well, you got to start developing something here.
Yeah. Well, let's just take the very first chapter. Key number one to unlocking your full potential is to not be stopped. It's a game plan against stress, anxiety, and deterioration, which that acronym stands for SAD, SAD. And a sad athlete is one who is stressed, anxious, and physically deteriorating, maybe mentally and emotionally too. And so the action step that's at the end of that chapter is to literally draw out a 7-day calendar and draw out just everything that you do throughout the day, athlete, right? Like 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. school, 3 p.m., well, let's say 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. practice. Like get it all of your requirements, get it all on paper so you can see them. And then find out where the gaps are for one. That's one step, is to find out where your gaps are and what are you doing in those gaps? Is it fueling you and filling you, or is it draining you? Step two is to write down all your values, the things that you actually care about in your life, and then look at your calendar and say, am I prioritizing this at all? Like, is this show up anywhere throughout my week? And then step three is, do you have a day off? I believe if an athlete does not have a day of rest from their sport, then they're going to lose their passion sooner or later. I'll tell you about another key. If you remind me about what it looks like when you lose your passion as an athlete, I'll tell you a story of an athlete. But then it's, figure out is where can I have a day off, and can I shift things around so that it's not like on Saturday I've got tournaments and on Sunday I'm doing strength training and conditioning. It's like, maybe you should just do that on Saturday as well, or Wednesday as well, right? And so the reason why this is so important is because number one, young athletes come to me all the time during mindset sessions, and they are stressed, overwhelmed. The words that they use are, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I have so much on my plate. And then sometimes when we just put their calendar up on the wall and they see that they actually have some good gaps throughout their week and they've got time to decompress, they immediately feel better because they see reality versus just what they think, right? They say to themselves, I have so much on my plate. And sometimes it's true. So that's one piece. But then sometimes there's a very obvious, when you get it all out on paper on a calendar, there's some very obvious like chip shots where I can remove this, I can move this, I can shift this, and immediately I give myself back some time or some energy or some focus. And so I think that when it comes to the parent's role, again, in the parent edition, I talk about how you can actually sit down with your athlete and do this together. You, depending on how old your son or daughter is, you might have to make some hard decisions for them. But the best thing to always do is ask them the question, hey, so we did this together. What are your thoughts, Johnny? Like, just let him talk. And if he doesn't have an answer right away, just give him space, right? What are your thoughts here? What were some things that you took away from this activity? What do you think we should change? Is there anything I could do differently? And I think that space between a parent and their child, that open space, if you don't have any kind of preference on what they do, I'm sure you have some preference, but I think that if you're like a parent that the reason why I wrote that chapter, I'll finish with this. The reason why I wrote that chapter is because there was a 9th grade girl who came in to meet with me one day. And again, she was in tears just because her grades were suffering physically. She had a knee injury and she was just continuing to push it and go to practice and go to tournaments. And when her mom and dad came in after the session, we all sat down together and her calendar was up on the wall. and we decided that it was just too much and she needed to remove something for the upcoming season and not do the extra stuff. Her dad's question was, and it was a leading question. He said, yeah, he said, but you really want to keep getting better, right? And it was like he clearly had a preference towards her continuing to do the extra stuff, which in this case was another team she was playing on. And so he said the question in a way that made her feel like she needed to say yes to it, right? Like, yeah, I want to keep getting better. So okay, let's just keep it on my schedule. And so as a parent, I think the hardest thing is like to ask yourself, man, like what's the best thing for my kid right now? And do they believe it's the best thing or not? Because if they're not bought in, they're not going to give their full energy anyway. And so, yeah, I think that just the space for parents to ask the right questions, the open-ended questions for their kids to openly talk is just so important.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, because what I'm hearing from you is parents really need to do the value assessment for themselves and understand what is the real long-term goal for
Yeah,
putting your child in sports and encouraging them to be this.
that's
And
good.
who is it for? Who's it for them benefit? And they can justify it. A lot of times parents will justify it and say, oh, I'm going to put Andrew in these sports because I want Andrew to get that scholarship and, continue their passion. But is that really what our long term is going to be?
Yeah.
And putting them in all these travel teams. One of the reasons why we were very reluctant to put our son Jacob into travel ball was I read a book by Cal Ripken, wrote about baseball. And his philosophy was he was not going to let his son play travel ball at all until he got into high school. And
Mm,
people were like, oh, he's going to be behind. And the first thing that Cal said is that I never saw a kid who came into the majors or even high level minor leagues who came there because of 10 years of travel ball. They came there because they were blessed with the talent, the drive, the determination. He says, that's there. They're going to migrate to it. He says, you
yeah.
cramming them through all these stuff might help them get on their middle school team or high school team, but it ain't going to help them any, you know, be that more elite. He said that's just a special gift. Um,
Yeah.
and I was like,
Yeah.
okay, if he has it, he has it, and we'll know it at that point. So, um,
Yeah.
my audience is not going to let me forget. They're not going to forgive me if I don't go back and remind you to tell me the story you said about passion. I believe.
Ah, yep. So a girl named Rebecca comes into my office. This is a couple years back. Comes into my office and she's got a knee brace on. She had just torn her ACL. I'm like, man, this girl was working so hard. She was a soccer player. She had actually had an ACL injury a few years back, and so tore it again. And she was just distraught. And we talked. We tried to build her back up, help her focus on the positives, help her figure out what she can control, and we did all that. And then about 4 or 5 months later, she comes back, and she was starting to be able to play again, but like no contact, and she was back on the field, and she was so happy. And I'm like, you must be excited because you're back. She said, Andrew, she's like, I'm excited because of that. She said, but I realized that tearing my ACL was the best thing that could have happened to me. I was like, what? Like, okay, tell me more. I like your mindset.
Yeah, I
She
want to
goes,
hear
no, no,
what
no.
she says. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She said, it reminded me how much I actually love playing this sport. And it dawned on me that for her, she had to go through an injury to take time off the sport, to take enough time off to actually miss it again. I'm like, but you don't need to go through an injury to be able to refill your passion back up. Her passion was drained because she didn't miss the sport at all. It's like a person who works all the time. Like you never really miss work anymore because you're just doing it all the time. And so for her, it reminded her of how much she loved the game. And then she started playing lights out like she had never had before because there's an incalculable value of passion. Like you can't calculate the value of passion until you don't have it. And then you're like, I know my athlete's missing their passion because they're just not playing the way they used to play anymore. And so I give in the book, there's 5 passion killers that I'm not going to go through right now. We'll save that for the book, but there's these 5 passion killers that if you don't make sure you prevent these things, they'll kill your passion. And ultimately you won't reach your level of performance that you could, but then you also won't enjoy the journey like you could, which is, I think, more important. Sports are a lifelong thing.
Great job of teasing and setting up as we conclude out. How can they connect with you to find out more about what these 5 passions are in the other books?
Yeah, so the website is andrewjsimpson.com. You can also go to unstoppableathletebook.com, and that's where you can get all the bonuses. I've got 5 bonuses on there that I think sometimes people see bonuses and they're like, oh yeah, maybe I'll get to those. Like these bonuses, like there's an 8-week downloadable action guide for the Unstoppable Athlete.
Oh,
That if
wow.
your athlete downloads that and goes through those 8 weeks, like they're going to take action and transform. There's an advanced goal setting course that I did for athletes that was really popular that's included as a bonus. The digital version of the parent edition is a bonus to the book. And so there's a lot of stuff you can get there, but that would be where they can get the book.
And audience, if you did not catch that, if you're watching, obviously, on YouTube, you know what to do. You look down into show notes and you'll find there. If you're listening, go to your podcast app and you'll find the links to that as well in the show notes as well. Andrew, can they connect with you on social media? Are you available? Are you there? Where can they find you?
Yeah, it's Instagram is at Coach Andrew Simpson. No J, just at Coach Andrew Simpson.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for sharing today. I love that as a athletic training facility that you focus first on the mental, that you're preparing them and giving them the tools they need to really be unstoppable in life. And I love the fact that you're looking at their mental health just as much as their physical health, because as someone who has had 2 athletes come through, and one of them was an All-American in swimming, I will say firsthand that is not commonplace among folks who work with athletes. I do agree with you that there is a tide, a slow tide moving. There is a movement to get that change going forward, but we need more evangelists of this like yourself to spread the word of, hey, we got to work with their mental health first. We got to make sure they have these things and the physical can follow, instead of physical, skill, physical, skill, which is what's happened so often. So thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate being on and appreciate all you do too.
And audience, thank you for sticking with us. Now listen, if you've been with us for almost 40 minutes, you've obviously are either finding some great fascination with this and want to learn more. So please like, share, and comment on this. And the most important aspect of those 3 things is to share, because someone you know needs to hear this message and know this content. So please share it with them, make sure it gets in the right hands. And we'll see you again very soon on another episode of the Generation Youth Podcast.